In the opulent, hushed halls of the Alhambra Palace, a high-stakes negotiation hung in the balance. Sheikh Tariq al-Farsi, a man whose wealth was measured in nations, stood poised to sign a monumental oil deal with a consortium of European magnates. But a crucial clause, mistranslated by an arrogant interpreter, threatened to unravel everything. The sheikh, his face a mask of regal displeasure, slammed his hand on the polished mahogany table. Thunderous echo in the cavernous room. He barked a furious command in rapid, guttural Arabic, his eyes blazing, and turned to storm out. The European delegates, pale and flustered, exchanged panicked glances, their interpreters stammering apologies no one understood. Just then, a figure emerged from the shadows near the service entrance. It was Aisha, the palace maid, her uniform a simple contrast to the room's gilded extravagance. She had been quietly collecting discarded teacups, her presence as unnoticed as the dust motes dancing in the sunlight. But as the sheikh's furious words cut through the air, Aisha paused, her head tilting almost imperceptibly. Then, in a voice as clear and melodious as a desert spring, she responded in flawless, classical Arabic, addressing the sheikh directly. The room, already thick with tension, froze. The sheikh, mid-stride, halted as if struck by an invisible force. He slowly turned, his piercing gaze locking onto the unassuming maid, his expression a mixture of disbelief and profound astonishment. It was as if a hidden oasis had suddenly appeared in the barren desert of his frustration. Aisha was young, perhaps in her mid-20s, with eyes that held the quiet wisdom of ancient stories. Her dark hair was neatly tucked beneath her headscarf, and her hands, though accustomed to humble tasks, moved with an innate grace. She wasn't loud, didn't demand attention, yet when she spoke, her words carried an undeniable authority, resonance that commanded respect. The European delegates, accustomed to their world of power suits and polished diplomacy, stared at her, bewildered. Simon, the lead negotiator for the European side, a man whose tailored suit seemed to shrink with every passing second, gaped openly. His interpreter, a man whose face was now the color of bleached linen, looked as though he might faint. "Forgive them, Your Excellency," Aisha said, her voice gentle but firm, her Arabic accent impeccable, a dialect rarely heard outside the most esteemed scholarly circles. They meant no disrespect. Their intention was to propose a partnership of mutual prosperity, not a transaction of subjugation. The sheikh's eyes, which had been narrowed in anger, widened, almost imperceptibly. He took a step back towards the table, his fury momentarily forgotten, replaced by an intense curiosity. "You speak my language?" he asked, his voice low, challenge veiled in surprise. Aisha bowed her head slightly, her gaze unwavering. "I lived in Cairo for many years, Your Excellency, studying the ancient texts." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the frantic scribbling of a junior aide trying to capture every word. Simon's jaw hung slack, his pen forgotten. The interpreter swallowed hard, his glasses slipping further down his nose, looking utterly defeated. The sheikh's expression remained unreadable, but a flicker of something akin to respect, perhaps even awe, passed through his eyes. Aisha stood calmly, her hands clasped, a quiet sentinel in the storm of high finance. It was a moment that defied all expectations, a maid stepping into $1 billion negotiation and holding it together with the sheer power of her words. As Aisha's voice filled the room, a sharp, disdainful laugh cut through the air. Came from Lady Eleanor, the sheikh's haughty, diamond-clad fiancée, who had been observing the proceedings from a gilded balcony. "Who let the cleaning staff into such important matters?" she sneered, her voice dripping with condescension. "Does she think her scrubbing skills qualify her for diplomacy?" A few of her equally well-heeled companions snickered. Their laughter echoing cruelly. Aisha's fingers tightened briefly on the hem of her uniform, but her composure remained unshaken. She didn't turn, didn't acknowledge the barb. Instead, she subtly shifted her weight, her shoulders squaring, a silent acknowledgement that she had heard every word. Lady Eleanor's companion, a man with a sneering smile and a ridiculously oversized signet ring, added, "Perhaps she's here to polish the sheik's ego. It seems to be in need of a good shine." The laughter spread, a low, venomous tide washing over the room. Aisha's eyes flickered, just for a moment, catching Lady Eleanor's gaze. "True value," she said softly in Arabic, her voice barely a whisper, "is not found in what one cleans, but in what one understands." Lady Eleanor's smirk vanished, her face paling, unsure if she had been directly addressed or if the maid was merely speaking to herself. If this moment resonated with you, please take a second to like this video, leave a comment below, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more stories of unexpected heroes and hidden strengths. Now back to our story. The palace manager, a portly man named Mr. Dubois, with a perpetually flustered expression, burst into the room, his face a mottled red. He marched directly to Aisha, grabbing her arm with a grip that bordered on aggressive. "What do you think you are doing, Aisha?" he hissed, his voice loud enough to carry across the hushed room. "You have no right to interfere in these negotiations." Aisha didn't pull away, didn't argue. She simply looked at him, her face serene, and offered a small, almost imperceptible nod. Mr. Dubois continued, his finger jabbing the air. "You are a maid, Aisha. You clean floors. You do not belong in the presence of such esteemed guests." The European delegates shifted uncomfortably, some averting their gaze, others pretending to examine their cufflinks. Sheikh Tariq watched, his expression unreadable, his arms crossed over his chest. Aisha bowed slightly to Mr. Dubois, her hands still clasped, and began to walk towards the exit, her steps slow and deliberate. The teacups remained on the table, a silent testament to the interruption. As she reached the doorway, a young, ambitious assistant from the European consortium, a man with slicked-back hair and an insufferable smirk, stepped forward. He cleared his throat, his voice dripping with mockery, and said in Arabic, "Leaving so soon? The palace isn't quite spotless yet." His tone was designed to humiliate, and a few of his colleagues chuckled, their eyes darting to Aisha's retreating back. She paused, her hand resting lightly on the ornate doorframe. Without turning, she replied in Arabic, her voice soft but resonant, "A clean heart is more valuable than a clean floor." The assistant's smirk evaporated, his face flushing crimson. Sheikh Tariq's lips twitched, almost a smile, but he remained silent. The room felt heavier, the laughter replaced by an awkward, palpable silence as Aisha walked out, her steps echoing faintly in the vast hall. No one spoke as she left. The air grew colder, thicker with unspoken judgment. Mr. Dubois straightened his tie, muttering something about protocol to Simon, who nodded vaguely, his eyes still fixed on the empty doorway. Sheikh Tariq remained motionless. His assistants, two stern-faced men in dark robes, whispered to each other, their gazes flitting between their leader and the now empty doorway. The interpreter cleared his throat, attempting to restart the conversation, but his voice cracked, and no one paid him any mind. The deal once again hung by a precarious thread. Outside in the quiet corridor, Aisha leaned against a cool marble pillar for a moment, her fingers brushing the worn pages of a small, leather-bound book tucked into her apron pocket. She took a slow, steadying breath, then continued on her way, her soft shoes making no sound on the polished floor. As Aisha moved through the palace's service corridors, a group of kitchen staff, their aprons stained with the day's labor, spotted her. One of them, burly chef with a booming laugh called out, "Look, it's the maid who thinks she's a diplomat." Now, his laughter boomed, echoing off the tiled walls. Others joined in, their voices sharp, with derision. "What's next? You'll be running the country?" Another quipped, tossing a soiled napkin in her direction. It landed at her feet, a crumpled, damp insult. Aisha stopped, her hand resting lightly on her book. She bent down, picked up the napkin, and folded it, meticulously placing it on a nearby trolley. "True service," she said, her voice soft but clear, her eyes meeting the chef's, "is not about the task, but the intention." The chef's laugh faltered, his ladle lowering as the others fell silent, their smirks fading. Aisha turned and continued down the corridor, her steps steady, leaving the stunned silence in her wake. In the grand reception hall, a group of palace guests, adorned in their finest silks and jewels, noticed Aisha as she passed. One woman, draped in pearls and with a voice that carried, said loudly, "Is that the maid who dared to speak to the sheik? How utterly presumptuous!" Her friends tittered, their crystal glasses clinking as they sipped their sparkling date juice. Aisha's steps slowed, but she didn't turn. She adjusted her headscarf, her movements, deliberate, and kept walking. The woman's companion, a man with a booming laugh and an even louder tie, called after her, "Stick to your mops, girl. Leave the important matters to us." Aisha stopped, just for a moment, and glanced back. Her eyes met his, calm but piercing. "A mop cleans floors," she said quietly. "But what cleans a closed mind?" The man's laugh died. In his throat, his glass frozen halfway to his lips. The group fell silent, their eyes darting away, as Aisha turned and walked through the massive, carved palace doors. Back in the negotiation room, the mood was sour. Simon tried to salvage the situation, offering Sheikh Tariq a strained smile and a new set of revised documents. "Your Excellency, if we could just clarify?" But Sheikh Tariq raised a hand, cutting him off. His voice was low, deliberate. "Bring her back," he said, his eyes still on the door. The room froze once more. Simon blinked, confused. Mr. Du Bois, who had been lurking near the back, stepped forward, his face contorted in protest. "Sir, she's just a—" Sheikh Tariq's gaze shifted to him, and Mr. Du Bois's words died in his throat, his mouth snapping shut. "Bring her back," the sheik repeated, slower this time, his voice resonating with quiet authority. "She will translate." No. One moved for a second, as if waiting for a punchline. Then one of Sheikh Tariq's personal guards, a towering figure in traditional dress, pulled out a chair, the soft scrape of wood against the marble echoing in the silence. Aisha was summoned. She walked in, her face still serene, and took her seat. She opened her small, leather-bound book, her pen poised, and began to translate. Every word was precise, every nuance captured. The sheik gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, his lips pressed tight, saying nothing. During a brief recess, Lady Eleanor, her smile tight and brittle, approached Aisha. "You must feel quite pleased with yourself," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Stepping in like that, but let's be honest, you're completely out of your depth, aren't you?" She tilted her head, waiting for a reaction. Aisha set her pen down, her movements slow, deliberate. She looked at Lady Eleanor, her eyes steady, and said, "Depth is not measured by one's station, but by one's understanding." Lady Eleanor's smile faltered, her fingers tightening on her pearl necklace. The other European delegates glanced over, their hushed conversations pausing. Aisha picked up her pen again, her focus returning to her book as if Lady Eleanor's words were nothing more than a distant hum. The room resumed its quiet buzz, but Lady Eleanor stood there, her face flushed, her carefully constructed confidence visibly cracked. The negotiation proceeded smoothly now, the tension easing with every sentence Aisha translated. She didn't merely repeat words. She conveyed the unspoken intentions, the subtle agreements, the true weight behind Sheikh Tariq's clipped responses. Simon kept stealing glances at her, his frown deepening, as if trying to solve an impossible riddle. One of his team members, a woman with perfectly coiffed hair and a string of emeralds, leaned over and whispered, "Who? Is she, really?" Simon simply shook his head, utterly baffled. When the meeting concluded, Sheikh Tariq rose, gave Aisha a long, assessing look, and left without a word. The European team packed up, muttering about flights and missed connections. Mr. Dubois, however, was not finished. He waited in the grand lobby, his arms crossed, his face a furious shade of crimson. When Aisha walked by, he stepped directly in front of her. "Who do you think you are?" he snapped. "A floor cleaner playing diplomat? You have shamed this palace." Aisha didn't answer. She reached into her apron pocket, pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden key, and placed it gently on the concierge desk with a soft click. The sound was final, like a door closing on a forgotten past. She bowed slightly, just as she had in the negotiation room, and walked away, her leather-bound book still in her hand. A few guests in the lobby glanced over, their eyes filled with pity, but Aisha didn't look back. She moved through the massive palace doors, her steps steady, her face unreadable. Behind her, Mr. Dubois was already on his phone, his voice loud as he demanded her immediate termination. "She's done here," he bellowed. "No one makes a fool of me like that." The head concierge, a young woman with a tight bun, overheard and shook her head, her lips pursed. She had seen Aisha studying late into the night, always diligent, always respectful, but she said nothing. No one did. As Aisha stepped outside, the warm desert air enveloped her. A palace guard, a young man, with a friendly smile, called out to her, "Hey, you're the one who spoke to the sheik, right? What, you think you're some kind of hero now?" His tone was light, but the underlying jab was clear. A few other guards chuckled, leaning against the polished palace vehicles. Aisha paused, her book clutched in her hand. She turned slightly, her eyes meeting him. "Heroes," she said, her voice soft but clear, "do not seek recognition. They simply act with truth." The guard's smile faded, his hands slipping into his pockets. The others fell silent, their laughter abruptly cut short. Aisha turned and continued walking, the golden light of the setting sun illuminating her path. That evening, a message arrived at the palace's main gate, marked urgent and bearing the sheik's personal seal. It was delivered directly to Mr. Dubois, who opened it with a triumphant smirk, expecting a formal apology for Aisha's insubordination. His face drained of all color as he read it. The note was brief. "The key you hold belongs to the Royal Library. Aisha is now its chief archivist. Her new quarters are in the West Wing. Ensure her comfort." Mr. Dubois's hands trembled as he folded the paper, his jaw clenched, so tight it ached. He said nothing to his staff, simply stormed off to his office, the sound of his heavy footsteps echoing through the silent halls. Aisha was summoned to the sheik's private study. She walked in, still in her maid's uniform, expecting a final reprimand. Instead, she found Sheikh Tariq seated at a low, intricately carved table, a small, velvet-lined box. Before him, he gestured for her to sit. She did, her hands folded in her lap. He slid the box towards her, his face serious. Inside lay a single, ancient-looking golden key, intricately designed. Aisha picked it up, her fingers tracing the delicate patterns. "You didn't just translate, Aisha," the sheik said, his voice deep and resonant. "You understood the soul of the words, a wisdom rarely found even among the most learned scholars." In the study, as Aisha held the golden key, Sheikh Tariq's personal advisor, the one with the perpetually nervous demeanor, lingered by the door. He cleared his throat, his voice low and sneering in Arabic. Don't get too comfortable, archivist. This is merely a temporary diversion. You are still just a servant. Aisha's fingers tightened around the key, her movements slow. She looked at him, her gaze steady, and replied in Arabic. A servant builds foundations. What do you build? The advisor's face contorted, his hand freezing mid-air. Sheikh Tariq, still seated, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Aisha stood, bowed slightly to the sheikh, and walked out, the golden key clutched carefully in her hand. The advisor remained by the door, his jaw tight, his carefully constructed world unraveling. As Aisha left the study, the heavy wooden doors opened to reveal the palace's chief event planner, a woman with a severe bun and an even more severe expression, who glanced at Aisha's uniform and rolled her eyes. You're the one causing all this disruption, she said, her voice sharp with disdain. This palace doesn't need drama from the lower staff. Her words echoed in the quiet corridor, loud enough for a nearby footman to smirk. Aisha adjusted her headscarf, her fingers brushing the golden key. She looked at the planner, her eyes calm but unflinching. Drama fades, she said softly. Truth endures. The planner's clipboard slipped slightly in her grip, her lips parting as if to respond, but no words came. The footman's smirk vanished, and the doors closed silently behind Aisha, her steps steady, the air around her quiet but heavy with a newfound purpose. Aisha's first day as chief archivist of the Royal Library was a revelation. She walked into the vast, ancient hall, its towering shelves filled with centuries of knowledge, her simple dress drawing curious glances from the few scholars present. A visiting historian, a woman with spectacles perched on her nose and a notepad in hand, approached her, before Aisha could even reach her new desk. So, you're the maid who stumbled into a position of power? She said, her smile more of a sneer. Care to comment on how you managed to charm your way into such a prestigious role? The question hung in the air, sharp and loaded. Aisha set her golden key on the polished wooden desk, its gleam catching the light. She looked at the historian, her eyes calm but unflinching. Charm, she said, does not unlock ancient knowledge. Dedication does. The historian's pen stopped, her smirk fading. The other scholars nearby shifted, their murmurs quieting as Aisha turned to her new responsibilities, her focus unshaken. The next day, the whispers began. It wasn't kind. Group of palace staff, led by the head housekeeper, a woman named Fatima who always wore too much perfume and a fake smile, huddled in the staff lounge. She's not even that educated, Fatima said loud enough for everyone to hear. Just a lucky maid.